filmed, he'll let us know. Rick, can you come back?
Yes, I'm here.
And I hope I didn't say things I wasn't supposed to say.
Oh, no. I'll just say that I had emergency gallbladder removal surgery. And that's why I have to be careful what I eat, and that's why I haven't eaten chocolate in a while.
Or dessert. That may not have been nice of me to say. Quit eating dessert.
Yeah, it's definitely a new adjustment period for me. And another reminder of our mortality, mine in particular. And another reason why I've been so glad to work with Michael and Annie and the rest of the MAPS team on this project. It just seems like it's really given our lives a lot of meaning and purpose.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Rick, I've told you, as a safety officer from MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, I think you'd be okay with a little chocolate.
Well,
be careful though.
Well, I'm definitely not an all or nothing, black or white kind of guy, so I will try to explore what I actually can do. And it's just been so nice to listen to Michael, to you and Annie speak too about how you view things and what we've accomplished. I just wanted to add about one point about this early intervention, and the point there is that the FDA has required us, if indeed we succeed in adults, that we have to do pediatric studies with people who are 12 to 17-year-olds that have trauma. And so that's only if we succeed in adults, but then we will have to do that. And if that works, then they've told us we have to work with 7 to 11-year-olds who've been traumatized. So I think that this idea that people who've been traumatized, it's more compassionate to work with them as soon as you can, rather than have them go through adolescence while they're suffering and then try to work with them later. The other part of that is trying to move from working with veterans to working with active duty soldiers. And so I think that's a big challenge for us as well, because moving into the Department of Defense and the active duty situation is something that so far the Department of Defense hasn't wanted us to do. But again, it's the same theory that the sooner that you can treat people to the trauma, maybe they don't need 3 MDMA sessions, maybe they only need 1. The other aspect to that too could be emergency rooms, where people come in suicidal to emergency rooms, and now it's easier to give them ketamine, but it might also be possible one day to give them MDMA, if we can have enough trained therapists. So I think earlier in people's crises, the better. And then that also addresses cost effectiveness issues too, if we can shorten the treatment because it's just so fresh. And as Michael said too, that a lot of people that are traumatized don't actually develop PTSD. A very relatively small fraction do. So, trying to do a study to see if you were preventing PTSD would require a large amount of subjects and would be very expensive. But it still makes sense to do. So, just to give you a update on where we're at, Michael mentioned, Michael or Annie mentioned that by the end of September, we're going to have the statistical analysis of our first of 2 phase 3 studies. And so we had the interim analysis in March, and that was when we had 60 subjects who had reached the primary outcome measure and had enrolled all 100 subjects. And at that time, the interim analysis was terrific, and it said that we didn't need to add anybody and that we had a 90% or greater probability of obtaining statistical significance. But that was right before COVID, and things got shut down. And so the FDA reached out to us, but also to other sponsors of research that was fairly far along, and they offered us the opportunity to end the study sooner. And so we looked at what was happening, and we looked at the number of subjects that were in the process and the number of subjects still that would be willing to go through therapy, the number of therapists still willing to work with people. And so we came to agreement with FDA that we would end the study with 90 people. And not all of them needed to have gone through all 3 sessions. We already had that in a sense, that we would include dropouts. So the concern about that is that the more subjects you have, the more likely you are to get statistical significance. So going from 100 to 90 will reduce our ability to get statistical significance a little bit. But we've got statistical significance from studies as small as 20 people and almost significant from a 12-person study. So we think we're in good shape for that. And we enrolled the last subject, got the last data point in August. And we are now in the process of data cleansing. The data monitoring is being done. And then once all that's done, then we have what's called data lock. That's the final database. All the queries have been answered. We know what we're at. And then after that, we're able to do the final statistical analysis. And so we will have that at the end of September, which is a tremendous milestone. So that if indeed we do have a statistically significant study, that doesn't mean that our second phase 3 study will be significant, but that it means that a roughly $10 million experiment on our first phase 3 study will have been successful. And we have several meetings with FDA after that that we've purposely delayed until after we have the data from the first phase 3 study. As far as our second phase 3 study, we have 2 sites in Israel, 2 in Canada, and 11 in the United States. And we have started up screening patients at about 5 sites. We're hoping that the rest of the sites will come online over the next couple months, or maybe into early 2021. And it'll all depend on COVID and what different therapists are comfortable with. That's our biggest challenge in a sense, because it costs us well over around $120,000 a month just for delays, for all of the staff that we have and the rents that we're paying and things like that. So that's really a challenging thing. What we're hoping to do, assuming that we get statistical significance, is in October, we're going to start a new fundraising campaign to bring MDMA therapy global around the world. So we just have completed this $30 million capstone campaign, which was incredible, that we could do this fundraising through Zoom, not in person, and at a time of the stock market crash, and now the stock market values have gone back up, but still, we were able to find enough really generous people to pledge multi-year commitments of $30 million, because we don't need to spend it all at once. So we're going to be spending it over the next couple of years. So we've successfully completed that, and if we have statistical significance from our first phase 3 study, then we think we have built in some delays for COVID in there, so we think it'll work out. In Europe, we've sort of gone on this idea of faith and that things will come together. And so we've raised $2.3 million for Europe. And we're using that money to start studies in 7 different countries. We're going to be initially starting in the Czech Republic and in the Netherlands, then in England, Germany, Portugal, Finland, and Norway. And we've agreed with the European Medicines Agency that we will do 1 phase 3 study with 70 people. So it doesn't even need to be a full 100 people in the United States like we're doing. And the only reason that they're doing that is because we'll have the safety data from all of the U.S. studies. And they've agreed on the same protocol design, which is therapy with inactive placebo versus therapy with active MDMA. So we are now going to be running out of that $2.3 million around January. The first thing that we're doing with these therapists is the final stage of training the therapist. So we start what's called a phase 2 study that is the same design as phase 3, but there's no control group. And the purpose is for the therapist to get experience working with a PTSD patient and then get supervision from Michael and Annie and from Bruce and Marcela and others of our therapy training team. And then if we feel that they're ready, then we will move to phase 3. So assuming that we can raise the money and not slow down for financial reasons, we think in the U.S. we will have all of the data by beginning of 2022. So, a bit more than a year and a half, about a year and a half from now. And then we think that we will hopefully have approval from FDA by the end of 2022. And once FDA says yes, then Israel's the Ministry of Health will say yes, and then the Health Canada will say yes. In Europe, we think that we're about a year or more behind, so that we anticipate, and again, this is really depending on COVID, but there's a lot less COVID in Europe, and they're starting up their countries a lot more successfully than we are here. So what we're hoping is by sort of beginning of 2023 that we would have all of the phase 3 data for Europe. And what's happening then is that we are most countries of the world will take the data from FDA or the data from the European Medicines Agency, and they will permit or approve the drug. And all that we'll need to do is train therapists in that country. So there's a good chance that if we do succeed in Europe, then we will really be able to globalize MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD. Japan is a notable exception because they feel that they're an island nation and that they are genetically distinct, and so you have to do a large phase 3 study in Japan. And we've really not started anything in Japan at all. We have had several people from Africa who are interested, and you know about this, but we now have a training that's coming up with Marcela and Bruce in association with Naropa. And we've got 2 therapists from Somaliland, one from Kenya, and we're hoping that we'll be able to bring MDMA there. And I think that's really where we're going to have to explore more group therapy, because the scale of the trauma is so enormous and the lack of psychiatrists and therapists is so clear that we're going to have to find other ways to deliver this in terms of grandmothers or who knows what kind of context it'll be. But I think we'll need to do a lot more there with group therapy. In addition to what we're doing now, trying to start the second phase 3 study and start the training protocols in Europe, there's several other studies that we're doing to educate the VA, basically. So we've adopted this strategy that Michael and Annie did first with Candace Monson and Ann Wagner with cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy, these projects that Richard Rockefeller got us enabled to do. And that was the first one that we were proposed to do. Because it was couples, because I think they thought that MDMA would be really good in that way. But we're also now trying to work with prolonged exposure, which is one of the main treatments for PTSD, with Edna Foa, who actually, in 2009, Michael and I were with her in Jerusalem at a PTSD conference, and she said, MDMA is dynamite for the brain, and you shouldn't even consider it, just give it up. And if people don't succeed with prolonged exposure, it's their fault because they don't follow the program. And then she also said, you've got virtual reality, just try that. It happened to be that there was a fellow, Skip Rizzo, that was an expert in virtual reality. He'd been funded by the Department of Defense and had developed VR programs for PTSD. And so what I went to Skip and I said, Edna says that we should study virtual reality. And he just started laughing. He said, if you have MDMA, you don't need virtual reality. So now all these years later, Edna is willing to do a study combining MDMA with prolonged exposure. So it'll be with therapists that we've trained in Israel, and it'll just be a small, 5 or 6 person treatment development study. Now, Barbara Rothbaum is going to do a study like that at Emory in Atlanta. And so she's been cautious in the sense that she has first done animal studies with MDMA and fear extinction and demonstrated that that works. Then she did healthy volunteers in a fear extinction study, and she's near the end of that and has demonstrated that that seems to be working. And then she's now ready to start talking about another prolonged exposure with MDMA combination body couples, and each would be half would get cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy, the half would get it with combined with MDMA. Now we've also been approved by the FDA for the Bronx VA study, and so we've been trying for 30 years to start research inside the VA system. The director of the Bronx VA has not yet approved giving the protocol to their IRB. But I think she will be, she's on vacation. When she comes back, she'll probably approve it. It's with Rachel Yehuda. So we're not really publicly announcing that we have FDA approval because Rachel was wanting to wait until her director had a chance to weigh in. So I'll share it with you now, but we're not making it public yet. But the FDA has said yes to that study. There's also a small study at the Loma Linda VA outside of LA that has both FDA approval and also their own internal IRB approval. And they're waiting for approval from the state of California. It's the only state that has a special committee for Schedule I research. And they only meet about 5 times a year. It's pretty slow. So that's looking pretty good. And then the DEA always wants to go last. So that will be another required couple months. But then we're hoping that these studies will start. And we've got independent funding for the Bronx VA study from a bunch of people that really care about that. The other thing that's been pretty amazing is that I was contacted by the Navy SEAL Foundation. And they know that bunches of Navy SEALs are going down to Mexico for Ibogaine, and that it seems to be helping them a lot. And they also are aware of our research with MDMA. And they actually had a board of directors meeting, and they changed their policy so that now they can support medical research. Before, they were just supporting treatment with evidence-based treatments, but now they can actually support research. They can only do $150,000 a year with a maximum of $50,000 to any one study. And so they want to donate, if they are going to do this, which looks pretty likely, they would donate first to phase 3. Then I've been saying that strategically, I think this Candace Monson, Ann Wagner study with MDMA with cognitive behavioral conjoint therapy to scale that up. Also because Candace is president of the the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, which is the largest organization in the world of PTSD researchers and therapists. And so having her as president of that is an enormous benefit for us. And so it just shows how much has come from this idea of Michael and Annie doing work with Ann and Candace on this treatment development study. Now, we are also engaged in a formal dispute resolution process with FDA. So not everything is rosy with FDA. They are definitely science over politics. They're being, of course, pressured in ways that they've never been pressured before from a political perspective, which is really disheartening to see. But I think they're also aware that we're likely to succeed. The psilocybin teams, Compass and USONA, are likely to succeed. And so they're wanting to be careful that they don't make big mistakes like they did before with OxyContin. And so even though for phase 3 we've negotiated and they've agreed in writing in this special protocol assessment that we don't have to have a doctor on site. We just have to have a doctor on call. There's a doctor that has to do the medical screenings, and there's various blood pressure and temperature readings that are taken during the actual MDMA administration, but we don't have to have a doctor on site. And the lead therapist is just a master's level therapist. It doesn't need to be an MD, PhD either. And the second person can be a student as a way to kind of keep the two-person model and reduce the cost. So FDA for the USONA and Compass, and for some of our new protocols, like the MDMA eating disorder study that we're about to start soon, has switched. And they say now they want a doctor on site and they want the lead person to be an MD, PhD, which makes no sense. And we've gotten lots and lots of letters, great letters from a whole bunch of people about why that doesn't really make sense. And then for the Bronx VA study, we decided to press the FDA. And so we said that we would not initially agree to MD, PhD. We just would use the same thing as in phase 3, the same conditions, because this is the same patient population and it's working well in phase 3. And so the FDA came back and they said that they would not require MD or PhD for the lead person as long as there was a doctor in the building. So that's really a good step. So they've at least acknowledged that the therapy team doesn't need to have an MD, PhD on it. Because we could get all the way and get this approved, and then it could be made way too expensive by some of these requirements. Another thing, the doctor on site. We're imagining thousands of clinics, and they're not necessarily going to want a doctor on site. And what is the doctor doing at these psychedelic clinics? And they'll be the prescribers, and they'll be screening people, but they don't need to be on site. So we're in this formal dispute resolution process. It's costing somewhere in the neighborhood of with expert lawyers who have won cases against the same exact division on other things. And it'll take us the next couple months to resolve this issue. And I think that's really important that we stand up for the way we think it should be, because FDA is also trying to imagine what is this like going to be post-approval if we actually succeed. So we're sort of arguing now about what it'll be like in the future, and we have to at least set a precedent. And our arguments are going to get stronger and stronger as we do more phase 3, because we are gathering data from teams that don't have a doctor on site and don't have an MD, PhD, and we're comparing them to those teams that do have a doctor on site or do have an MD, PhD. And so far, we've seen no difference whatsoever in safety or efficacy. So even though we might not win in this formal dispute resolution at the moment, in a year or two, when we start talking about post-approval, we'll have said what we think is important precedent, and then our data will be getting stronger and stronger, assuming that the data actually comes out the way that we think it will. The last thing I just wanted to say is that we are preparing a protocol for marijuana for PTSD. We got $2.2 million from the state of Colorado, and we did that study with 76 veterans with PTSD. A lot of veterans do use cannabis, and we were shocked. We spent 7 years to get permission for the study, 3 years to do the study, $2.2 million, and at the end of it, the study didn't work. And the reason is because the placebo response was so great, which shocked us. So to just illustrate that, there was one guy who did great. His PTSD was substantially diminished, but even more importantly, he was on opiates for pain. And he was able to get off the opiates for pain. And so he decided that he would become a public spokesperson, and he would speak to the media about how great marijuana was for him and how much it helped him. And he got a lot of attention. And then when the study was over, it turned out he was in the placebo group. So the study, didn't work. I mean, what placebo marijuana is, it's alcohol-washed marijuana that takes away the cannabinoids and the terpenes. But you're still smoking something. But it just doesn't have any active ingredients in it. So now the state of Michigan has legalized marijuana, and friends of ours worked on that, and they put in a little paragraph that said that the state of Michigan has to spend $20 million a year for 2 years on research for veterans to help veterans' mental health and reduce veteran suicides. And the money can only go to nonprofits or to academic researchers. So we're developing a protocol that we think will cost $10 million. It'll be roughly 500 subjects. And we've been working on it for the last couple months, and we're getting ready to submit it to the FDA for their review. And we're not going to use the government marijuana from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is so terrible. We'll import either from Canada or Israel. And we hope to get the protocol approved in the design. We're not sure where the marijuana will come from before the request for proposals comes from the state of Michigan, which we think will be near the end of this year. But they've been doing great, selling lots and lots of marijuana. So there's a bunch of marijuana tax money there. The other final thing we're doing is we're getting ready to sue the Attorney General and the DEA over this National Institute on Drug Abuse monopoly that they have with the University of Mississippi. So right now there's only one DEA licensed supplier of marijuana, and their marijuana is terrible quality, but it's also only for research, not for commercial use. And so it cannot be used in phase 3. It can only be used in phase 2, because in phase 3 you have to use the exact same product you want to market. So when we hear about all these medical marijuana states, the route through the FDA has been completely blocked by this government monopoly. And in 2016, shortly before Obama left office, the DEA said that they would end the monopoly, that there were no problems with international treaty obligations, and around 35 applicants have submitted applications. Now, that was over 4 years ago, and once Trump got elected and Attorney General Sessions was there, he said no progress for marijuana, and then Barr has been the same. But they did put out some proposed regulations quite a few months ago, half a year ago, and there was a 2-month public comment period, and now it's been well over 3 months since they've had the public comments, and they've done nothing. So they're just trying to run out the clock and delay. So we're going to sue them and say that this is discrimination, that it's unreasonable delay, and that they need to decide. And this actually is a 20-year project. Starting in 2000 is when we worked with Lau Craker at UMass Amherst to submit the application. And so that's overall where we're at. It's just really exciting. I think the big challenge for us is going to be trying to raise this $30 million for Europe. But I think that we might be able to do it, and we will do our best to do that.
Well, thank you, Rick. Whew. If anyone can raise $30 million, you can. It's amazing watching you do it. So
Yeah.
congratulations on all that's going on. It's amazing.
Yeah. The one thing about it, I'll just say this, is that it's roughly 1/3 the cost to make MDMA a medicine in Europe than it is in the United States through the FDA. But that's only because we are leveraging all the data we have from FDA and submitting that to Europe. But when you think about incremental change, just around 25, 26 million is going to be for Europe, and the rest will be for around the world.
Wow. Okay. Well, I think we're up to date with what MAPS is doing. Thanks to Annie and Michael and Rick. Wonderful to have all of you with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the update, Rick.
Everybody can see why Rick is emailing at all hours a day and night for going on 40 years now.
Right.
It doesn't happen automatically.
Hard work. Yeah, great.
Oh, there's one thing, and if I could just say, I think one thing that Michael and Annie, that you guys said has really struck me, that's a massive sign of progress. And so, so Michael and Annie now have a bunch of grandkids that they didn't have before. And so they're wanting to spend more time with grandkids. And we had a meeting that was discussing a project that was going to take place in the Netherlands with sort of a new approach with sort of intensive, like several weeks of mindfulness, yoga, all of this, and then they would add MDMA to treat PTSD. And we also had Franklin King from MGH talk about what he's going to do with home base. And it was just a really exciting meeting about these other projects. And what's stuck with me so much is that afterwards Michael said that he got the sense that this is moving forward without us, that there is so much going on that he can feel good spending more time with his grandkids.
Yes. When I get to, now we have to see him from a distance, but hopefully that'll change.
Sounds like maybe you did too, Rick.
I did get that feeling. I mean, I still, yeah. It feels good to see how much is happening. Yeah, and after I had my surgery and had, a week or so where I couldn't pay attention to anything, I just felt, hey, it's going forward even without me. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Well, you'll be such a great grandparent that I can't wait till you get to experience it.
Wow.
Thank you, everyone, and thanks to people who've been with us now for 3.5 hours.
Thank you.
We can keep this open if people want to stay on, but I think that this really is the official end. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow. Good to see you all.
Okay, yeah, and I have to go do the interview for the Netflix documentary about changing your mind, about Michael Pollan's book.
Great. Bring us along. We're with you, Rick.
I feel it.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
There we go.